tax reform in '86, needed updates, we did it again in the early '90s, and we have to do it again. A silver bullet solution I look at as being problematic and worrisome. We've seen the fallout from the most recent silver bullet solution in terms of healthcare in this country. The Affordable Care Act was billed, Obamacare was billed as a silver bullet that was going to fix healthcare in America. Yeah, it didn't do that. There's been all kinds of unintended consequences. One of the biggest components of the fair tax is that it would have the states act as the collectors. That would be a mandate the feds are policing on the state collection agencies. The Supreme Court case dealing with the Affordable Care Act says the feds can't mandate that kind of stuff. They can't mandate Medicaid expansion. They can't mandate exchanges. I don't think that mandating the states to collect taxes for the feds is going to fly. What about states like Delaware that doesn't have a sales tax? States like Oregon that doesn't have a sales tax? Montana, they have no component in place to collect any type of consumption tax. My fourth point, too, is when you start getting into the world of consumption taxes, you start talking about a VAT tax, a European-style VAT, which puts about, in some cases, a 20% tax, sometimes a little bit less on each stage of production that can eventually get passed on to final retail. VATs are notorious for being able to hide tax increases in them. You can tweak it one step along the way, increase the tax a little bit, and by the end, you have a higher tax coming out on the end. The fair tax operates a little bit like this by making the tax inclusive. So it's the tax is built into the product. You're not being billed what the actual tax is. They say the fair tax is 23%. It's actually 30%. If you calculate taxes the way we calculate, if you calculate the fair tax the way we calculate a state sales tax, which is tax exclusive, so it's the tax you pay the tax on the product and you see what you pay. Yep. That would give you the 30%. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. She hooked you.
Yep, we got you.
There you go.
I was like, oh, no. Yeah, I was just getting on a roll.
How many of you, like me, are accepting Social Security benefits? Doesn't it just irritate the hell out of you to hear people call that an entitlement?
Yes.
I paid into it all my working life, and I'm getting it plus the interest that it earned. It's not an entitlement.
Thank you. Yes. I get angry about that.
All right, the other thing Will said was you have to have wage cuts. Why? The companies are already saving on their income tax. They're saving on the employer portion of the payroll tax. Right? When I was studying for my MBA, I learned that you cut your costs or you raise your prices. And if you cut your costs, you can lower your prices. Well, those are the costs. They don't have to touch wages at all. As a matter of fact, the working American will take home pretty much his entire paycheck. Right? So for most people, that's 7.5% for the payroll tax, and that's, 15%. The average withholding, right? That's 22.5% increase in your paycheck. Now you add the prebate in, and you've gotten some pretty good money. So even if prices don't fall, let's go on out and say prices don't fall, you will have enough in your take-home pay to compensate for that price increase. Now, as far as embedded, when I go out to Wally World and I want to buy a $1,000 big screen TV, I see the sign on it that says $1,000. I take it up to the checkout, pay them $1,000, and I keep on going out. Same thing will happen with the fair tax. It'll say $1,000, I'll pay $1,000 and keep on going. The only difference is that 23% of that $1,000 goes to the government. Anybody have a calculator handy? If you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, I got a couple.
Right. When you take 23% of $1,000, you get $230. That leaves $770. When you take 30% of $770, that's right at $1,000. So it's the same amount of money going to the government, whether it's 23% of this or 30% of the lower number. They're both the same. Right? It's a red herring. Does not matter. Either way, you're sending the same amount of money to the government. And one of the things to think of is what are taxes for? They are not to punish people. They are not to punish corporations. They are to provide money for the government to continue. Anytime you have a flat tax or an income tax on a corporation, there will be deductions, there will be exemptions, there will be playing around. I know Congressman Johnson isn't into it, but there's an awful lot of congressmen that will sell their votes for increasing an exemption for somebody so they can get campaign donations. We know that. It's perception. All right, we talked about the Camp bill. Right? Representative Camp and his committee spent almost a year working on tax reform. Came back with, this is what we're going to do. Representative Camp is leaving at the end of this term. He's not running for re-election. And he's going to go be a tax lobbyist. Come on, folks. The states, when they're collecting, all but those few states that Will mentioned that don't have a sales tax, every one of them are set up to collect sales taxes from the businesses. They're not mandated, they can do it. They will get 0.25% of everything they bring in. That will be a profit center. They will make money by collecting these taxes. As far as the VAT's concerned, VAT doesn't even have a reason for being in this discussion. It has nothing. Congress can put a VAT in right now and start harming American business even more. And there's the bomb. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Well, let's open it up for questions, and we'll let you folks guide the discussion. There's another microphone here. Alex, do you want to run the microphone around?
Rod's going to do it.
Rod's going to do it? Okay, great. This gentleman, the gentleman in the very back up there raised his hand first at the very beginning. So let's go to him first.
I have many questions.
First thing, like I said,
Well, you get one right now, and then when everybody else gets a chance, we'll come back to
Anybody
it.
got a book like this called Black's Law Book, Black's Law Dictionary? It's got legal terms. So if you're reading the IRS code, read it. This is going to tell you what the code is. When it says a person is a person or corporation, and it will say that in the IRS code. So are you a corporation? And you say yes. But really, are you really a corporation? First thing I wanted to say was about that flag. That flag, if you really look at that flag, it has a yellow or orange fringe around the flag, doesn't it? What is that? Admiralty Maritime. What does the little thing sitting on top of it represent? Well, so we switch the flag, we really know what that flag is. Also, I don't want to say like we're doing tax avoidance because it's illegal to say that. It truly is, right? But what we're not saying is, why are we arguing with anybody? Why not just do what they're giving us, right? So why don't we all create LLCs, right? There's a very special LLC I'm about to talk about, right? And it's a multi-member LLC, and she's cloaked in the public, but she's actually private. And what she has is she has an indenture that's with it that says basically that the entire LLC will pay everything. And if it has to pay the tax to the U.S. citizen, it will pay 5%. And if you have two members at 5%, you only pay a tax of 5%, whatever it does. But if the LLC gives a loan to the U.S. citizen, there's no tax. So it's just something to think about, right? And why are we talking about Bill Gates and Whirlpools? Oh, we can talk about Whirlpool, but why they don't pay tax? Because Bill Gates and them all know how to run an LLC or corporations and what they have to pay. And somebody said about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, is it a publicly or privately owned company?
Both, technically.
It's a privately owned company. Right? There's a book called The Fruit of the Poisonous Tree. I suggest I could read that book. Because they said if you're a U.S. citizen, in the book, it said it's called Trading with the Enemy Act. It's 1933. It says you're an enemy of the United States. And I had to really read that. Why does it say that? Because you're a 14th Amendment citizen. And are you a 14th Amendment citizen? Right, so slaves do not. So I went down to my Board of Elections and I asked them. I said to them,
Excuse me, do you have a question concerning
Yeah,
either
is
flat
Is there a
tax or
question
fair
on the
tax?
flat or fair tax?
I'm just going to say a couple things that I.
Okay, thank you. I saw this gentleman's hand right here with the glasses on. Next.
I had a couple questions for Will. One is, why are you muddling the argument for the fair tax by talking about a VAT tax? They're not the same at all.
Oh, anytime you start talking about consumption taxes, you have to be concerned about a VAT and anybody that wants to shift to a VAT system. I mean, one of the biggest issues is that the fair tax, they say they want to get rid of the 16th Amendment. There hasn't been work done to do that yet. The guys are pushing a balanced budget amendment, are light years ahead. They've actually got state legislatures passing resolutions calling on an Article 5 convention. Until we start doing that with the 16th Amendment, income tax will always be around. We could easily go the route of Europe. You could have an income tax and a consumption tax. Now, if you're talking about consumption taxes, one of the biggest problems with the fair tax is tax avoidance, especially on services. So if you go to your lawyer or an accountant or somebody like that and you pay with a credit card, you're going to end up paying the fair tax rate, which is 23%. If you're paying in cash, it's a lot harder to keep track of that. Government doesn't have the government doesn't have the capability to say, well, you did legal services for this person, so you have to pay the 23%, because they don't know that for sure. If you go to an accountant, they don't know what the accountant did your books, or if you did it yourself. There's no proof of that. So when you expand the sales tax to services, you get into a much more difficult area to enforce. One way around that, and European countries have done, to get around any type of tax avoidance is implementing a VAT, because they tax at every step of production. So everybody each step owes that tax and it keeps getting passed on. That's the worry with any type, when you get into basing off consumption.
I know what a VAT tax is, but
Yeah.
I just don't know how that relates to the fair tax. It is not the same thing at all.
It's anytime you open up the door in consumption taxes, you can end up with a VAT. And that's the concern.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a consumption tax, and the concern is that we could easily move to a VAT. I mean, we talk about tax reform and doing a tax system, and you know, we're guilty of this, of thinking we're going to have Republicans in office forever and everything is going to be fine. The problem is we don't always have it. And last time we had full Democratic control, they gave us Obamacare.
Now, we're aware that the politicians can screw up any tax.
Yeah.
We've seen that. But, okay. The other question I
Yes.
had was, in your rebuttal or your initial statements, you said in one proposal that individuals would not pay tax.
There's Milton Friedman's proposed two different versions of a flat tax, and one of what he kind of
What
termed
was
a
the other
pure.
version? I didn't hear that.
That's what they termed a negative income tax, and it deals with a rebate system. Basically, it sort of based itself off the federal poverty line too, and if you make below it, you actually end up making a little bit of money. The federal government gives you money back. I don't have the exact details of it on me, I don't think. But it's termed the negative income tax. Friedman wrote about it in his book, Freedom and Capitalism. That idea has never really picked up steam because it's kind of a weird tax structure. But his pure flat tax is one that basically would be primarily on employers unless you're an S Corp or an LLC, and file as an individual that way.
So it wouldn't be on an individual's income? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Not under Freeman's pure flat tax, no. It would only be paid by the corporate side.
Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, okay. While we're here.
Value-added tax, VAT tax. Congress can do that right now. Right? No question about it, if they want to. So they can do that whether we have a consumption tax, an income tax, it does not matter. Right? So be aware of that. Right? A
Saying they
consumption.
have the authority to do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. When you have a consumption tax, and when we say consumption tax, that sort of is very broad, right? The fair tax is retail goods and services. Now, maybe somebody can explain to me, but how a VAT on production can make up for a lawyer not disclosing how much money he made. Somehow I can't understand that, unless it's just to get more money in. VATs are on production. We have enough taxes embedded in the goods that we buy now. We spend 20 to 30% of what we spend on new goods is taxes. Anybody heard of Ormet? Right? Think about this one. If the coal companies could reduce their price by 20%, even 15%, let's say 15%, that they're selling to AEP. AEP could lower their prices by 15% that they're selling to Ormet. Congressman, you were involved with Ormet. What would they do if they had 15% reduction in their energy prices?
They'd probably still be open.
They'd probably still be open. And all those folks, 1,000 or more people that are now on unemployment, would still be working. Right? Keep that in mind. Thanks.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to commend both you guys for wanting to make a change, because obviously we need one. Would like to say, you keep referring to European models, and you see on TV they're rioting and tearing the place up. Europe's going bankrupt.
That's my fear.
Yeah, well, I mean, your fear is substantiated, because if you put in a new tax system as either one, let's say either one goes, and you still have the 16th Amendment, and Congress has the ability to still impose that tax, now you've created another tax that you've basically did ourselves in. So it has to put in one and take out the other for the trust to come from the people. You can't have a new tax with the old system still available. I don't think you're going to get the support from the people, because I'll be honest, no reflection on you, Congressman Johns, but I don't trust. It's like we got to look at the taxes and just see what's in it, kind of thing.
I don't trust them either, so.
And we saw what happened with the health scam, and what that's going to cost. I shared some information. I actually did a study. I'm a retired high school principal, but now I'm teaching math. I'm a math major. We actually studied the health scam, healthcare.
You're right. You can call it what it is.
3.7%. If you guys sell a house, 3.7% of your profit's going to go to the healthcare. And a lot of people don't even know that. There's so many hidden things that you're going to be taxed. That's what my biggest concern is, the hidden taxes. You get a fee on your license plate. It's not a tax, but it's a fee. You just call it a different word, but you got to pay $25 more for the same thing. This, I'll be honest with you, this makes more sense to me, because you know what you're paying. And the other thing I would strongly recommend is that you put a cap on it and make a high percentage of Congress that can change that cap, okay, as far as what the actual tax can be, because it's ridiculous. My taxes this year, I gotta pay $5,000. I didn't fill out anything last year different, and I got back $2,000. And I'm good at it, so I went down to H&R Block and had them do it and got all my exemptions. Still got to do, there's hidden things, deductions that they take out. See, that's the other thing that's not listed in here, the deductions that they can take out of these taxes. There's no deductions in this. You pay it, you take it home. That's it, that's your deduction. If you don't want to pay the tax, don't buy the product. But if you have more money, as Mr. Allman explained, you're more apt to go buy more. So therefore, a lot more businesses will flourish. That's my biggest problem, is that the 16th Amendment would still be involved.
Let me respond to that one. The fair tax has a stipulation in it. It nullifies the entire Internal Revenue Code, right? Wipes it out. It's gone. It has a sunset clause in it. But after 7 years, if the 16th Amendment has not been repealed, then the fair tax is repealed. And we go back and Congressman set up a new income tax. Right? So during that 7-year period, there will not be both. There cannot be both.
Do you not have to have a constitutional convention or open an amendment up?
Nope. You're not opening the amendment.
Hold on, sir, hold on.
You're not opening the amendment. All you're doing is eliminating the Internal Revenue Code. They have to start from scratch to rebuild the income tax. So that answers your question there. Now, what about deductions? Right? There are none. With the fair tax, the only exception is education related, and tuition and fees are exempt from the tax because they consider that human capital, and that's their investment in the future. Absolutely, Congress could raise that 23%. They could raise it to 30, 35, 40% anytime they want. They can raise our current income tax anytime they want. And you know what a battle it is. One of the things they can't do with a sales tax like the fair tax, they can't have class warfare. They can't say that the rich will have to pay more. They can't do that. When you have a flat tax, first thing is, as Will said, there isn't a proposal right now. So what he's basically saying is you have to support it and then find out what's in it. But if you end up with a flat tax, let's say there's no deductions, just 15%, that's it. I can very easily see Billy Bob Deep Pockets calling Congressman James and saying, hey, I supported your campaign. I'm glad that you're in. And by the way, we need to get us an exemption because those taxes are really hurting us, hurting our businesses. So, I'd really appreciate it if you'd vote for this tax deduction or exemption for our industry, and we'll go out and we'll get started on our fundraising efforts. And how long before we get the same thing that we currently have? Right? With the fair tax, you can't do that. Who's going to be lobbying for exemptions? No corporation's going to be looking for exemptions. They're not paying the tax anyhow. Right? Are we going to band together and say, gee, we want exemptions on butter? It won't happen.
Yes.
Well, fat stuff, we want snacks, you're right. So that's just something to think about. Thanks.
Yeah, under a flat tax system, there's no credits and deductions. Everything's eliminated, one flat rate, everybody pays the same rate.
Now.
A couple things with the 16th Amendment and everything. Repeal after 7 years. If you nullify the IRS code as it is now, there's nothing for after a year to keep it. The Democrats take Congress, keep them coming back and putting it back in place with a fair tax in place. You have to eliminate the 16th Amendment first before you can do anything. And one major rule in tax reform is, and when you're trying to draw businesses into a state or into a country, is you don't want an up and down tax code. You don't want uncertainty. A 7-year sunset, and then we might have a flat or fair tax for 7 years, and let's say we don't get the 16th Amendment repealed, then we're going to go back to an income tax and something else. That doesn't send a very good message to businesses wanting to locate in the United States because they don't know what to prepare for in 7 years. And finally, talking about anytime you're dealing with taxes, there is a cottage industry of lobbyists who will lobby for exemptions, who will lobby for not having the tax applied to them. And the instant you start seeing people who think that they're going to be affected by having a higher sales tax rate, one of the biggest, any industry that thinks it's going to hurt their bottom line and doesn't think that costs they're going to be able to cut costs or prices are actually going to drop, they're going to send lobbyists to Washington to say, hey, well, we're expanding all these services, but let's not expand it to this industry. This industry should be exempt like education purchases. So if you purchase something in this industry, you don't have to pay it. To say that is that's just the reality of the problem with Washington. Thankfully, there are some good congressmen there. Congressman Johnson's one of them. And from our end, something we promote is the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, which is a pledge that we give the congressmen to sign. It's to you guys. It's to their constituents, saying they'll oppose efforts to increase taxes. Congressman Johnson's a proud signer and has stuck to it. Some congressmen aren't as loyal to their constituents, and they'll break that pledge and they'll vote for a tax increase. But yeah, that's something. Either route you go, it's still going to be a fight, because eventually, unfortunately, at some point, you might get another Nancy Pelosi in there as speaker, and you might end up with another Harry Reid in the Senate, and you might end up with another Barack Obama in the White House, and they will once again look for ways to get revenue, to spend money, and shower it about on their constituencies to keep themselves in power.
Yeah, good points on both sides here. He mentioned one thing, regardless of which side of the fence you fall on which tax proposal, the issue of uncertainty in the business world is a crippling issue. It is, and I'm not talking about lobbyists. I'm not talking about the Bill Gates of the world. I'm talking about Fred's Donut Shop down the street here, and I'm talking about companies which actually are small companies, by the way, in the big scheme of things. Companies like Ormet or RG Steel, or the companies that employ our people, or used to, here along the Ohio River. The issue of uncertainty in the business climate, both from a regulatory and a tax perspective, is a crippling issue. I have business people coming to me all the time saying, look, we don't care what you do. For God's sakes, do something and let it stick, and stop jerking us around so that we can plan for the future. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that from an economic perspective, a business perspective, uncertainty, whether it's regulations, taxes, whatever it is, that's a crippling issue for businesses.
This question's for Will. I'm a charter member of the Campaign for Liberty, and I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
Yeah, I know Norman Singleton and some of the guys at National Royal. They're awesome guys.
Okay, well, Ron Paul has refused to turn over the donor list, which I'm one of, to the IRS, who is demanding it. Now, my concern is with your flat tax, you're still going to have the IRS, and they're still going to be using it to politicize our views and so on and so forth. How do you address that?
The IRS targeting. So the main thing is with a flat tax, you'll still have the threat, I guess, of an audit. The main difference is you no longer have credits and deductions. The code's simple. You pay 15% of your income. It's a lot harder to falsify records to make that. The government knows through payroll what you're getting paid. You pay 15% of that. The IRS. The only reason the IRS would audit you is because they think you're trying to hide something. Now, the issue with targeting, though, that was actually targeting a lot of what they call 501c3s and 501c4s. These are tax-exempt groups. ATR is a 501c3 and a C4. We have both designations. We thankfully we're not targeted this time around. We've had audits in the past. We actually audit ourselves every year to just avoid this problem. Yes, the IRS will still exist. Will be much, 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 much smaller because they're only